Picture this. You're deep in the desolate plains of Kazakhstan, hundreds of miles from basically anywhere. This is the Kengir prison camp, one of the most isolated and brutal parts of the entire Soviet Gulag. But in 1954, something absolutely extraordinary was about to happen right here.
And get this isn't a movie plot. For 40 incredible days, thousands of prisoners took over, they kicked out their guards, and they built their own society. A little beacon of freedom right in the darkest heart of the Soviet Union. So let's get into this incredible true story. We're going to break down how this impossible rebellion even got started. We'll see exactly how the prisoners built their own little republic inside the walls, and we'll unpack its tragic but incredibly powerful legacy. Right, so the first question is, how could something like this possibly happen? I mean, this is the Soviet Union we're talking about. Well, to understand that, we've got to look at Moscow, where the iron grip of the state was starting to show some serious cracks.
Okay, so it all starts when Stalin dies. Suddenly, there's this wave of hope rushing through the gulags. Then, his absolutely ruthless security chief, a guy named Lavrentiy Beria, he gets arrested and executed. And this puts the camp guards in a really weird spot. They were terrified. If they were too harsh, they could get branded as followers of the traitor Beria. But if they were too soft, they'd lose control. This power vacuum was the opening the prisoners had been waiting for.
Now, inside the camps, you have these two main groups who absolutely hated each other. The politicals, these were your intellectuals, your nationalists, people locked up for what they believed, and the thieves, who are basically career criminals. The guards always used the thieves to terrorize the politicals, but something started to shift. The political prisoners began to organize, and they started secretly taking out the camp informers. And this earned them this new kind of grudging respect from the thieves, which set the stage for a pretty shocking alliance.
The final spark, the thing that lit the fuse, came on the night of May 16th. Some thieves broke into another camp section. The guards just panicked and opened fire, killing 13 prisoners and wounding dozens more. And that was it. The simmering anger just exploded. The rebellion was on. So after that shooting, everything changed. The prisoners, politicals and thieves now completely united, drove the guards out of the camp entirely. They took control of the whole thing. And for the first time in Gulag history, a period of real freedom began behind the barbed wire. For 40 days. Just let that sink in for a second. Not a few hours, not a couple of days. 40. This was completely unprecedented. The authorities in Moscow were just stunned. The prisoners had created their own fortress of liberty right in the middle of a police state. And what they did with this freedom was just remarkable. Life, real life, came flooding back. Priests who were prisoners themselves officiated weddings for couples who had only ever been able to talk secretly through fences. They held poetry recitals, religious services, lectures. It was this stunning explosion of culture and humanity in the bleakest place you could possibly imagine.
But they didn't just stop there. They weren't just surviving, they were governing. In one of the most astonishing acts of self-organization you'll ever hear about, they built a complete, functioning provisional government.
I mean, just look at how organized this was. They elected a former Red Army colonel, Kapitan Kuznetsov, as their commander. And then they set up all these different government departments. They had a Department of Defense to fortify the camp, a propaganda department to wage an information war, and even a technical department full of engineers to solve all the complex problems. Their propaganda was especially brilliant. See, it wasn't anti-Soviet, no. They broadcast messages like this one, framing the guards as the real traitors, as followers of the disgraced Beria. They actually claimed the rebellion was a patriotic act to restore true justice. It was a masterful move that just completely confused the authorities. And their ingenuity was just off the charts. The technical department turned the camp workshops into a little weapons factory, making pikes and sabers. When the guards cut the power, their electricians just siphoned electricity from the lines outside the camp. And to get their message out, they built kites and used carrier pigeons to drop leaflets on the nearby village, begging for help. For 40 amazing days, this little miracle held on. But the prisoners knew. They knew it couldn't last. The Soviet state simply could not and would not allow this symbol of defiance to exist. The end was coming, and it was going to be brutal. Really, the question was never if the authorities would retake the camp, it was how. After weeks of negotiations that went nowhere, Moscow decided it was time to make an example out of Kengir.
At 3:30 in the morning on June 26th, the assault began. We're talking 1,700 Red Army soldiers, attack dogs, and 5 T-34 tanks stormed the camp. The tanks just smashed through the fences, literally running over prisoners and demolishing the barracks. It was an absolute massacre.
So how many people died? Well, the official numbers are still disputed. Soviet figures claimed only 37 were killed. But the survivors? They estimated that somewhere between 500 and 700 people were killed or wounded that morning. The truth, like with so many Soviet atrocities, was just deliberately buried.
So the Republic was crushed. The leaders were executed, and the other prisoners were shipped off to different camps. But you know what? The story doesn't actually end there. The spirit of those 40 days was never truly broken, and its legacy echoed far beyond the walls of Kengir.
Because despite that horrific ending, survivors remembered those 40 days not as a failure, but as a triumph. One said they felt a great feeling of freeing one's spirit. For a brief moment against all odds, they had lived as free people.
And here's the crucial takeaway. Kengir and other uprisings just like it absolutely terrified the Soviet leadership. It proved that the brutal, Stalinist Gulag system was unstable and that prisoners would resist, even if it meant certain death. And that realization helped speed up the slow, painful process of dismantling the Gulag system in the years that followed. The Kengir Republic was this brief, impossible island of freedom in an ocean of pure tyranny. It's an incredible reminder that even in the most hopeless circumstances imaginable, the drive for dignity, for justice, and for liberty can inspire the most extraordinary acts of courage. And it leaves us all to think about this question. What does this story really teach us about that uncrushable human desire for freedom?